You keep setting that alarm for 5 and you keep hitting snooze, and somewhere in that half-second decision, made in the dark, half asleep, you are telling the universe exactly who you are, not who you want to be, who you are. Right now, this morning, before you've had a single sip of coffee or said a single word out loud, you already voted. And that's the part nobody wants to hear before breakfast. Here's the thing about that extra 9 minutes of sleep. It feels like nothing. It feels harmless, private, forgivable, but it's never really about the 9 minutes, is it? It's about what you're quietly practicing every single morning without even realizing you've enrolled yourself in training. You're training yourself to negotiate with your own commitments. You're training yourself to fold the second something asks for effort before it hands you a reward. And that training does not stay politely in the bedroom where you left it. It follows you into your work. It follows you into the way you talk to the people you love. It follows you into the goals you describe with real passion at dinner parties and then never actually chase once the plates are cleared. Maybe you've told yourself you're just not a morning person. Maybe you've built an entire identity around that sentence, worn it like a badge, like it explains something, like it excuses something. Perhaps right now you're listening to this in the car or on a walk you almost talked yourself out of taking, and some part of you already knows this was never really about mornings at all. It's about the fact that you've been waiting to feel motivated before you move, waiting for the right circumstances to finally line up, waiting for some future, more capable version of yourself to show up out of nowhere and take the wheel while the current version of you keeps riding in the passenger seat of his own life. Maybe you've been blaming the job, blaming the economy, blaming the way you were raised, the town you grew up in, the people who never believed in you the way you needed them to. And look, some of that pain is real. Nobody is standing here telling you it isn't. But somewhere along the way, blame stopped being a place you visited to make sense of things, and it became a place you moved into permanently, furnished it, hung pictures on the wall. Perhaps right now you can feel the gap between the life you're describing to other people and the life you're actually living behind closed doors when nobody's around to perform for. That gap has a name. It's called drift. And drift doesn't announce itself with some dramatic collapse, some obvious rock bottom you can point to later. It just quietly costs you a year, then another year, then a decade you cannot get back no matter how hard you bargain with time. And one ordinary Tuesday you look up and wonder how exactly you drifted this far from the person you once fully intended to become. Maybe you can still remember a version of yourself who had real fire in him. Maybe there was a year, not that long ago, when you actually believed this was going to be the one, when you bought the notebook, made the plan, told a friend about it with real conviction in your voice, and then life did what life does. A bad week turned into a bad month. The notebook ended up in a drawer. The plan quietly dissolved into the background noise of bills and errands and just getting through the day. Perhaps you've made peace with a smaller version of your own future because it hurts less than reaching for the bigger one and missing. Nobody's going to say that out loud at your family dinner, but you know it, don't you? You know exactly where you softened the goals so the disappointment wouldn't sting as much. Here's the part that should actually wake you up, though. None of that means you're broken or lazy or somehow different from the people you admire. It means you've been operating without a system, riding on feeling alone, in a game that was never designed to be won that way. And the good news, the actual good news buried underneath all of this discomfort, is that the fix isn't complicated. It isn't expensive. It doesn't require you to move cities or quit your job or wait for some perfect window of free time that never opens. It requires a handful of decisions made daily, starting tomorrow morning before the sun's even fully up. So let's talk about what actually closes that gap. Not hype, not some countdown clock energy that fizzles out by Wednesday afternoon the way it always has before. Something steadier than that. Something a plain-spoken man used to explain with gardens and seasons and simple, almost embarrassingly obvious math, because he understood something most people never learn until it's too late. Big transformations are never built from big moments. They're built from small, boring, unglamorous choices that nobody claps for, made quietly, over and over, long after the excitement has worn off. Let's start with the one everybody gets backwards. Most people are out there chasing motivation like it's fuel, like if they can just get inspired enough, hyped enough, pumped up enough by the right video or the right speech, the rest of their life will simply take care of itself. But motivation is a visitor. It shows up unannounced, it feels absolutely wonderful while it's here, and then it leaves, usually right when you need it the most, right in the middle of the hardest stretch, without so much as a goodbye. Discipline is different. Discipline is the one that stays after everyone else has gone home. Discipline is what gets you moving when the feeling never showed up at all, when there's no spark, no fire, nothing but a quiet decision made in an empty room. Here's a simple way to think about it. Motivation is the match that starts the fire, but discipline is what keeps you feeding the flame at 2 p.m, when nobody's watching and absolutely nothing exciting is happening. You don't need to feel like doing the work. You need to do the work whether you feel like it or not, and eventually, after doing it enough times, the feeling actually starts following the action instead of the other way around. That's the whole secret, and it's almost insulting how simple it is once you finally see it. Try this today. Pick one thing you've been sitting around waiting to feel motivated for and go do a piece of it in the next hour, with zero enthusiasm required, stone cold, no fanfare. That's the muscle you're building, and muscles don't care how you feel about the rep. Think about the people you actually admire, the ones who seem to just quietly get things done year after year without any of the drama. Do you honestly believe they wake up every single day bursting with inspiration? Do you think the disciplined man never wants to stay in bed, never feels the pull of the couch, never has a morning where the last thing on earth he wants to do is show up? Of course he does. He's human, same as you. The only difference is he stopped waiting for permission from his own feelings a long time ago. He built a relationship with his commitments that doesn't require his mood to sign off first. That's not some rare gift he was born with. That's a decision he made over and over until it stopped feeling like a decision at all and started feeling like who he simply is. And here's the uncomfortable flip side of that. If you're waiting for the feeling to arrive before you'll commit to anything, you have quietly handed the steering wheel of your entire life over to your mood. Your mood, which changes with the weather, with how you slept, with a single rude comment from a stranger in traffic. Is that really who you want driving? Somebody who changes his mind before lunch based on nothing more solid than a passing feeling? The people who actually build something worth having learned a long time ago not to consult their feelings before doing what needed to be done. They just did it, feelings trailing along behind like a dog on a leash instead of leading the way. Now here's the second piece, and it might be the one that stings a little if you let it land. You did not get to choose the winter you were born into. You didn't pick the family, the circumstances, the setbacks that hit you when you were far too young or far too unprepared to defend yourself against any of it. Nobody gets to sit down and negotiate with the seasons. Winter arrives whether you're ready for it or not, and it does not care one bit about your excuses, your explanations, or how unfair the timing feels. But here's what you do get to choose. And this is the whole hinge the rest of your life swings on. You can't stop the storm from arriving, but you decide whether you build a shelter or just stand there in the open getting soaked, telling everyone within earshot how unfair the weather has been to you specifically. That's the entire distinction, the one that separates two people who go through the exact same hardship and come out on completely different sides of it. It's not what happens to you. It's what you do about it. Two people can lose the same job, grow up in the same broken home, get dealt the exact same rough hand at the exact same table, and 5 years later, one of them is bitter, stuck, still telling the same old story on repeat, while the other one turned that season into the very thing that made him. The difference was never the circumstance itself. The difference was the decision about who to become inside of it. Blame is comfortable precisely because it asks nothing of you. It lets you keep your hands in your pockets while pointing them at everyone else. Responsibility is harder to carry, but it comes with something blame never offers you, which is actual power over what happens next. So here's your action step for this one. Stop asking why this happened to you, and start asking what this season might be quietly trying to build inside you. Write down one hard thing you're facing today, and right next to it, write down one skill or one piece of strength this exact season could be forging, if you'd only let it do its work instead of fighting it the whole way through. Think about it this way. A farmer doesn't stand in his field in January cursing the frost, demanding it behave like July. He knows exactly what season he's in, and he adjusts his entire approach accordingly. He mends his tools. He plans his rows. He does the quiet indoor work that summer never gives him time for. And then when spring finally arrives, he's ready. Not because the season was kind to him, but because he refused to waste the season he was actually in complaining about the one he wished he had instead. Ask yourself honestly what season you're in right now. Is it a winter of setbacks? A spring of new beginnings you haven't fully committed to yet? Whatever it is, the question was never whether you like the season. The question is whether you're using it, or simply enduring it with your arms crossed, waiting for it to end on its own. Now let's talk about seeds, because this is where people lose their patience, and impatience has ruined more good decisions than almost anything else on this list. You do not plant a seed on Monday and expect to harvest a full-grown tree by Friday afternoon. Nature refuses to be rushed, and neither does any real lasting progress, no matter how badly you want the results to arrive on your schedule instead of the world's. But here's the trap, and it catches nearly everyone at some point. Because the results aren't instant, people quietly assume the effort isn't working, and they quit right before the roots would have finally broken the surface. Discipline feels invisible in the early days. That's precisely why so many people abandon it right before the payoff. They're out here planting seeds on Monday and digging them back up on Wednesday just to check if anything's happening underground. And of course, nothing visible is happening yet. They just killed the roots with their own impatience. The 5 a.m. mindset was never really about the hour on the clock. It's about becoming someone who can plant something in the dark, walk away, and trust the process long enough for it to actually grow, even when the calendar isn't handing you any proof yet that it's working. Your action step here is simple to describe and genuinely going to test you. Pick one discipline, just one, and commit to it for 30 straight days without checking for results daily, without measuring your progress obsessively, without quitting on day 9 because nothing visible has changed on the surface. Water the seed. Walk away. Let the ground do its quiet, unglamorous work while you keep showing up anyway. You've probably heard people talk about compound interest, how a small amount of money left alone long enough eventually grows into something remarkable, not because of any single deposit, but because of time and repetition working together quietly in the background. Discipline works exactly the same way. Nobody ever got strong from one workout, or wealthy from one paycheck saved, or wise from one book read cover to cover. But stack that one workout, that one saved paycheck, that one book, day after day, month after month, and you're not just doing the activity anymore. You're compounding it. The early days feel like nothing because compound growth always looks flat at the start, right before the curve finally bends upward. Most people quit standing on the flat part, convinced the whole thing is broken, having no idea they were 1 week away from watching it bend. Ask yourself honestly how many things you've abandoned in exactly that spot, right before the curve, simply because the flat part felt like proof it wasn't working. Here's the fourth one, and this is the one people love to argue with, right up until they take an honest look in the mirror at their own life. You are, in a very real and measurable way, the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not because of magic, not because of some mystical force, but because of simple, constant exposure. Their habits slowly become your normal. Their standards become your ceiling, or sometimes your floor. Their complaints become the background soundtrack of your own thinking, whether you ever consciously agreed to absorb any of it. If everyone around you is comfortable with mediocrity, comfortable with excuses, comfortable staying small and calling it being realistic. You will drift toward that same comfort, even while insisting out loud that you're different from them. And if you surround yourself instead with people who wake up early, who read, who build things, who take responsibility instead of quietly handing it off to somebody else, you'll find yourself rising to match them without even trying particularly hard, because that's simply what happens when the water level around you starts to rise. This one requires some real honesty from you. Ask yourself who's actually in your 5 right now. Not who you wish it was, who it actually currently is. Are they stretching you, or are they quietly giving you permission to stay exactly the same? And then ask what their average life genuinely looks like, because that average is quietly becoming your blueprint, whether you ever signed up for it or not. Your action step. Pick one person in your circle whose discipline you genuinely admire, and spend more deliberate time near them this coming week. Even a single phone call counts. Proximity changes people slowly and permanently. Let it change you on purpose for once instead of by accident the way it usually does. And listen, this doesn't mean you have to burn down every relationship you've got. Loyalty matters. History matters. But there's a difference between loving someone and letting their ceiling become your ceiling too. You can care deeply about people who are still figuring things out, still stuck in a season you're trying to leave behind, without agreeing to stay stuck right there alongside them out of guilt or habit. Sometimes growth doesn't look like cutting people off dramatically. It looks like quietly adding new voices into the mix, new rooms to sit in, new conversations to be part of, until your average starts shifting upward all on its own, without a single confrontation ever taking place. Now here's the 5th piece, and it's about vision, because discipline without any direction just burns you out, chasing nothing in particular, running hard in circles and calling it progress. Most people are walking around with wishes, not goals. A wish is soft and vague and comfortable. Something like, I want to be successful someday, and it floats around forever, never demanding a single thing from you in the present tense. A goal has edges. It has a date attached to it. It has a number or a name or a finish line you could actually point to on a map if someone asked you to. The reason so few people ever achieve what they claim to want is that they never really decided what they wanted in the first place, not with any real precision, not with anything specific enough that you could hold it in your hand and measure it against your progress. So here's your action step. Take 5 minutes today, right after you finish listening to this, and write down one specific goal with an actual deadline attached to it. Not someday, an actual date on a calendar. Put it somewhere you will see it every single morning without fail, because a goal you can't see in front of you is a goal you'll slowly, quietly forget you ever even had. Here's why the date matters so much more than people give it credit for. A deadline turns a daydream into a decision. Without a date, there's always tomorrow to start, and tomorrow, as it turns out, has a funny habit of never actually arriving. The moment you write down an actual day on the calendar, something shifts in the back of your mind. Suddenly, there's a cost to waiting. Suddenly, the wish has teeth. You don't need a perfect plan for how you're going to get there, not yet. You just need the target nailed down first, because a man aiming at nothing in particular hits it with impressive consistency every single time. And here's the 6th, the one that ties every single piece together, because none of this ever works as one dramatic gesture made on a good day. Success was never one giant leap taken by a braver version of yourself. It was always a handful of ordinary disciplines, repeated on the days you didn't feel like showing up, stacked quietly over months and years until the results finally became impossible for anyone to ignore, including you. The workout that felt pointless on day 4 became the body that felt genuinely possible on day 104. The single page you read when you were exhausted and half asleep became the mind that could finally think clearly under real pressure when it actually mattered. None of it looked impressive in the moment it was happening. All of it mattered anyway, quietly, invisibly, brick by brick. That's the part people skip past because it isn't glamorous enough to post about. But it's the entire hidden engine underneath every transformation you've ever admired in somebody else from a distance. Your action step is to choose one small discipline you can realistically repeat daily for the next 30 days. Something so small you genuinely can't talk yourself out of doing it, and treat that repetition like it's the whole game. Because at the end of the day, it actually is. People are always searching for the secret, the hidden shortcut, the one thing nobody else knows about. But there isn't a secret hiding behind some locked door. The formula was sitting out in plain sight the entire time, which is exactly why so many people walk right past it, looking for something more complicated. Wake up early. Do the hard thing first. Read something that stretches you. Move your body. Keep your word to yourself. None of that is a secret. It's just simple. And simple isn't the same thing as easy. Simple things done consistently, for years instead of days, are what actually separate the people who talk about the life they want from the people quietly living it. Nobody films the boring part, so nobody sees it. And that's exactly why so many people underestimate just how much of a real transformation is built from repetition nobody ever bothered to record. Now, let me tell you something I don't usually say out loud, because it's always easier to talk about principles than it is to talk about the mirror hanging in your own bathroom. I know what it feels like to set an alarm with real, genuine conviction the night before, and then lie there in the morning making 100 quiet, perfectly reasonable-sounding excuses that all seem logical at 5 a.m. and completely hollow by 9 once the day is already moving without you. I know what it feels like to hear something like this, feel fired up for about a day and a half, maybe 2 if it was a particularly good one, and then slide right back into the same comfortable drift, telling yourself that next Monday will finally be different this time. Maybe you know that exact feeling too. Maybe you've started over so many times that you've quietly stopped believing your own promises to yourself, the way you'd stop trusting a friend who cancels on you again and again. That's not weakness. That is simply what happens to every human being who tries to change using only willpower, with no system behind it, and willpower was never built to survive past the first genuinely hard morning. But here's what I've come to believe, and I need you to actually let this one land instead of letting it slide past you like the rest. The 5 o'clock alarm was never really the challenge. The real challenge is deciding in that quiet half second before your feet hit the cold floor whether you're going to be the kind of person who keeps his promises to himself even when nobody is watching and nothing is at stake except your own quiet respect for who you are becoming. That decision, repeated enough mornings in a row, becomes a personality. And a personality, repeated enough years in a row, becomes an entire life. You are not stuck. You have simply been overdue for a decision. None of what I'm telling you requires talent you don't already have. It doesn't require a lucky break, a rich relative, a different birth certificate, or perfect timing that finally lines up in your favor. It requires the same 6 things anyone has ever used to change their own direction. Show up without waiting to feel like it. Treat hard seasons as material instead of punishment. Be patient enough to let the roots do their invisible work. Choose your 5 people on purpose instead of by accident. Put an actual date on what you want. And repeat the small, boring things long after they stop feeling new or exciting. That's it. That's the whole list. And it was sitting right there in front of you the entire time you were searching for something more complicated to explain why you hadn't started yet. I think about how many mornings I've wasted negotiating with a version of myself who was clearly half asleep and clearly not thinking straight, and yet somehow I kept letting that half-asleep version make executive decisions about my entire day. That's the strange trick of it. The most important decision of your morning gets made by the least capable, least rested, least clear-headed version of you that exists in the whole 24 hours. So maybe the answer isn't trying harder in that groggy moment. Maybe the answer is deciding the night before, when you're clear-headed and calm, exactly what tomorrow's version of you is going to do. So there's no negotiation left to have when the alarm actually goes off. You remove the decision from the moment you're weakest, and you hand it instead to the moment you're strongest. I've also noticed something else, something people rarely admit. The mornings I actually got up when I said I would, even on the days I felt terrible about it, were never the mornings I regretted. Not once. Not a single time in years of doing this have I laid down at night thinking, I really wish I'd stayed in bed instead. But I could fill a book with the mornings I hit snooze and quietly regretted it by lunchtime, carrying a small, nagging disappointment in myself that colored the rest of the entire day. That should tell you something. The scoreboard was never close. So here it is, plain and simple. The one line I want you carrying out of this video and straight into tomorrow morning. Discipline is just love you haven't given yourself credit for yet. Say that back to yourself the next time the alarm goes off and every excuse in the world shows up uninvited, right on schedule, exactly like it always does. In the next 24 hours, I want you to do exactly one thing, no more and no less. Pick the discipline that scares you the most to actually commit to. The one you've been quietly avoiding because it would genuinely mean something if you followed through with it. And go do the first small piece of it before you let yourself check a single notification on your phone. Not next week. Not next Monday. Tomorrow morning. That's the whole assignment, and it's smaller than it feels right now. And before you go, do one more thing for me, because this last part matters more than it sounds like it should. Down in the comments, I want you to type just one word, the discipline you're committing to starting tomorrow. One word. Discipline, consistency, whatever it happens to be for you specifically. Put it there, not for me, but for yourself, because writing something down in front of witnesses has a strange, proven way of making people actually follow through on it. The version of you that you keep waiting around to become is not coming to rescue you from a distance. He's already inside you right now, waiting on one decision, made quietly at 5 in the morning, when nobody else is watching and nothing about it feels impressive yet. That's exactly where it starts. That's exactly where it has always started for every single person who ever changed the direction of his own life.